How's it going, everybody? Happy Monday. So in today's trade recap, I'm going to go over the trades that I took on Tesla and SPCE. I took 7 trades within the first hour. For myself, that's a lot. So overtraded a little bit, but overall managed risk. I was up a decent amount, not a ton on the day. And then the last trade, I gave a chunk back, and that was a sign for me to just call it a day. But before I get into the details of that, I want to make a special announcement. I just recently launched a private Twitter where I'm going to be posting my daily newsletter watch list. And here's an example of the one from today. So what I'm going to be doing with this is everything that's in my head prior to market open, my trading process, I'm going to write down in a 1-page format. So what I'm going to be doing is doing a quick overview of the market. So the SPY, the QQQ, just like I do in my videos, the upside levels, the downside levels, and then a sentence or two as to what I think could possibly happen and what I am looking for the day. Same with the Qs. If there's any sort of market news or market events that are happening that day, I'm going to make sure to put them down. And then the 4 to 6 stocks that I'm watching each morning, I'm going to put those down. I'm going to put any company specific related news, the upside levels, the downside levels, and then I put a couple sentences under each stock that I'm watching with some of the levels that I'm looking at and maybe the overall bigger picture. I try not to have too much of a bias coming into the morning, but just being aware of the overall trend of these names. And then of course, the most important thing is those 4 major technical levels that I always highlight: prior day high, prior day low, pre-market high, pre-market low, and then some sort of technical pattern around those levels. And one I want to highlight, because I think I was kind of on the right side as far as an overall thought process, was this SPCE. So I had the big gap up really early in the morning. I'm sure everybody was bullish on this name. So I wrote in the notes, could it be a sell the news event? It felt like if everybody's on one side, that there's a possibility that the opposite happens. And I just quickly jotted down that it gave a lot of the pre-market move back. So for myself, this actually allowed me to not be too biased to the upside, even though the daily looked really good. So this allowed me to not have any FOMO and buy the open just because, and then really highlighting the levels. If it takes out prior day's high, there's a chance that it could catch momentum. But if it takes out prior day's low, it looks like it has some downside room to the 9 EMA on the daily, which is at 47.06, and then just waiting for those technical levels to get taken out. So that way I can figure out which way the direction is and then wait for a technical pattern, which is what I did. So this is a really good example of the newsletter watch list that I'm going to be posting on my private Twitter every single trading day, 30 minutes before the open. This is a really easy way to get an inside look at my process and how I approach the market each and every day. So if you're interested in getting access to this, I will put a link in the description below. Feel free to check it out. Okay, so now let's get into the technicals of the overall market and then the technicals of the watch list. So starting with SPY. Nice candle on Friday, still above the 9 EMA. The dip got bought a few trading days ago. I'm sure everybody probably thought it had to go lower. Strong bullish market. So coming in today, the levels that I was looking at just to get a gauge of overall direction, it is in an uptrend. Prior day's high, 435.84. If it takes that out, it's going to be a new all-time high. If for some reason there was some weakness in the market, just knowing where prior day's low was, which was 430.71. And now looking at the Qs, so the dip got bought as well a couple days ago, still trending above the 9 EMA. So the levels that I was looking at was prior day's high, 361.50. If there's any weakness in the market, prior day's low, 357.57. Also knowing that all-time high was just above at 362.76. Okay, now looking at Tesla. So a few days ago, had a pretty big gap down, reclaimed a lot of the moving averages. It gapped up this morning. It was above the 9 EMA, so reclaimed the 9 EMA on the daily. The levels that I was looking at was pre-market high, 665.69. Prior day's high, 658.91. Pre-market low, 656.95, and prior day's low, 644.69. And even though there was a lot of resistance to the left on the daily, I figured if it could reclaim the 9 EMA, maybe it had a chance to catch some momentum today. And now getting into Amazon. So the daily chart looks pretty good. This looks like a quick flag pattern. I feel like it had a chance to go higher, but rather than being too biased, just letting those technical levels tell me what it wants to do. The levels that I was looking at was prior day's high, 37.48. All-time high, 37.59.99. Pre-market high, 37.44.25. Pre-market low, 37.31.69. And if there was any weakness in the market, just knowing where prior day's low was, 36.93.40. And now NVIDIA, and the reason why I was watching this is because it's still a very strong daily chart, and it did have an upside gap to fill. So the levels that I was watching, prior day's low, 790.17, pre-market low, 801.50, prior day high, 803.21, pre-market high at 812, and then knowing that there was that upside gap at 813.28. And now getting into Apple, and the reason I had this up is because it's recently made a new all-time high. Even though it's not a big mover, I felt like it was worth watching. So the levels that I was looking at was prior day's high, which was also a new all-time high, which was 145.65. It was trading above that. The next upside level was pre-market high, 146.21. Pre-market low, 144.75. And if for some reason there was any weakness, just knowing where prior day's low was, which was 142.65. And now getting into SPCE, so I had a big gap up early in the morning and then just gave it all back in the pre-market. So it was showing weakness before the market even opened. So rather than having too much of a bias, these are the levels I was looking at. Pre-market high at 59.99, prior day's high 52.63, pre-market low 49.25, prior day's low 48.46, and knowing where the 9 EMA was on the daily at 47.06. Okay, now to get into the trades, I'm going to do them manually because the video is just way too long. I took a lot of trades today. So starting with the first trades, I ended up waiting almost 15 minutes off the open before I finally took my first trade. And it's right here, 943.26. I took some Tesla calls. So it broke through pre-market high very fast. It pulled back to VWAP in the 9, started to form a flag pattern. And then when it ended up breaking the flag pattern right there, right near that 9, I ended up going long 3 contracts. This had a very quick push, and then it instantly came back in, and I actually got out of that for a really small loss. I ended up getting 3 at 14.70, and then the moment it pulled back and started to show some weakness, just to be safe, I got out of the trade at 14.50, so I lost 20 cents a contract. And now getting into the second trade. So as it continued to show some strength, I realized that I probably just got shooken out, which happens sometimes. And then as it broke this 1 minute candle high, I took 3 contracts. I wanted to go for the high a day. I got filled at 15.42. And then the moment this thing broke the high a day and started to slow down a little bit, I just took the quick move and I got out at 16.07. So those are the first 2 trades. The next 3 I took on SPCE. So it actually did have a very quick 1 minute opening range break to the downside. It was a little too fast for me, but just knowing that it broke pre-market low, prior day's low, and it very quickly got below the 9 EMA, just showing a lot of weakness. And this is where I took the first trade. So nice flag pattern right around the 9 EMA. I ended up taking some puts, the 44 puts. I took 3 of them, and I ended up getting them at $3.45. And I got a pretty quick move, but they did not move that much. And I ended up getting out at $3.55 for 10 cents a contract. So nothing crazy, but nice to get a small win. Here's where I took the next trade. So had that quick move down, got back to the 9, could not hold above it, starts to get under the 9 in trend. And then I went for the low a day break right there. I ended up taking 3 43 puts. I got in at $3.35. I got a very quick move on the low a day break, and I took profits at $3.68 per contract. So once again, another trade that's not very exciting, but nice to get a quick win. Here's where I took the third and final trade on SPCE. So nice flag pattern under the 9 EMA, breaks the trend line. I end up going short. I took 3 42 puts. I got filled at 320, and I think I did a good job here at getting out, so this looked pretty good. It was going for the low a day break, went under low a day, and then instantly reclaimed it. So the moment I saw that strength, I ended up just getting out of the contracts for $3.15, and I only lost 5 cents a contract. And I'm pretty happy about that stop out, because had I held it or been patient, like sometimes I can be, this would have ended up being a much bigger loss. Okay, so now let's get into the last 2 trades, which were on Tesla. So Tesla was in a nice trend above the 9 EMA. I ended up taking it long on this flag right here. So nice flag pattern, close to the 9. Took it on the break. I ended up going long. 3 685 calls. I got filled at 1280, and then when it made a new high and it started to speed up, I just took quick profits and I got out of those contracts at $13.15. So that was a nice quick trade, and at this point I glanced over at my P&L and I was up $355 on the day. That's not a lot, but that's an awesome amount of money to make within the first hour of the open. But of course, like I talk about, when I start to overtrade, when I get over that 3, 4, 5 trade mark, it usually only takes 1 for me to mess a good thing up. That's what happened on this last trade. I gave a good chunk back, and then that's when I called it. So this was the last trade of the day on Tesla. I went for a flag pattern, just continuing to chase this higher. and I gave it a chance, had a quick move, and then pulled back pretty hard. I was a little too patient with this. It got back above the 9, made a push towards high of day, and then when it rejected it and came back in, I got out of the trade just to be safe, and I ended up taking a loss. So I got into the 685 calls at 14.05, and I got out of them at $13.35. And when it was all said and done, I ended up finishing the day up 145. So I was up 355, gave a chunk back. At that moment, I was able to take my hands off the keyboard, take a deep breath, realize that I would rather be up small green than ruin a good thing and let small green go to red. And that's exactly what I did, realizing that I have taken a lot of trades and I'm at that hour mark, so just have the discipline to walk away. So that was the trade recap. I appreciate you watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.